Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to What Tanks Blitz, and this was originally going to be a video that I do every Christmas, which is my favourite tank that is 1 to 10. However, this is instead going to be a video which is kind of a follow-up to my update 5.5 video. Don't know what I got from that crate. I clicked off it too fast, but yeah. So this is just going to be an update to the basically low tier tech rework, and that is something to do with how they've also rebalanced the tanks, because for the most part you probably won't worry about any of this other rework for the tanks. Over what I've already said, the guns have mostly stayed the same. For example, the gun on the BT7 artillery has still got a 5.4 second aim time and also a 4.81 second reload time. So yeah, that hasn't changed. Single shot guns, nothing much has changed at all for them. However, something that has changed is the autocannons. So they've reworked all the autocannons, which is the whole point of this low tier tech tree rebalance. So, for example, the Panzer II, they've changed the flak gun very weirdly. As you can see, it now has 5 shells in the magazine instead of 8. Still has a 0.13 second reload time, and it still has a 7.13 second complete magazine reload time. The average pen has been bumped up, and I think, and the average damage has stayed the same in most part. But the shells in the magazine has decreased, which I don't see the reason why. Because it already had an 8-shot magazine, why take away 3 shells? And they still fire in bursts of 2. So the first 2 shells go out bang bang, bang bang. And then the final one just sort of goes bang at the end. It's like, why? You can't just sort of leave us with 1 shell in the magazine, and why take away the other 3 rounds? It just slows down the match. Because, for example, the Cruiser 2 used to have 3 shells in the 40mm, it now has 2 in the pom-pom. The VAE as well, again, that had a pom-pom on it. At least I think it did, but apparently now it doesn't even have a pom-pom anymore. They decided that's too confusing for you now, so instead you just sort of, yeah, have either a 47mm thing, or you have the 37mm, which is, or the 45mm, which is the Russian thing. So you don't even have a pom-pom on that anymore. Obviously the autocannon's been taken away from the R35, leaving it with only the 37, or yeah, the 2 37s is all you're going to get, of which this one has got a slightly worse rate of fire and slightly less armor pen, and worse accuracy. But still, there's no autocannon on this. Which leads me to wonder just why remove the 3 shells from the Panzer II, because the Panzer II is now very strange to play, because instead of having 8 shells, which is still 2 less shells than you have on PC, you've now instead got 5 shells, which fire in 2 bursts of 2 and 1 burst of 1. And it's why. It just doesn't make sense. And okay, yeah, sure, you could probably get over this. However, for example, let's take a tank like the T1E6, which isn't a particularly great tank. It's also this year's free tank, which I was hoping for a new free tank, but because I already have this, and this was the free tank with the glacial camo, of which I already have this camo, so I don't even need the free glacial armor camo that they give you for Christmas. But hey, at least they've given us something. But still, this isn't a particularly great tank. And you remember that the 37mm autocannon, well, gun on the T1E6 had 5 shells in the magazine, yeah? 2 shells in the magazine. Still with an 8-second reload. It's like they've removed shells and just left the reload times the same. It's like, no, you can't just do that. You've got to rebalance the reload time as well. You can't just take away shells and go, "Da, that is good rebalance on tank." You sort of can't just do that. Because now we've just got the same reload time, but for less damage. And yeah, it's less damage per minute and stuff, but it also just removes any sort of pacing, because you sort of pop out, take 2 shots, and then have to sit back for 9 seconds whilst you reload a piddly 2 shells, which probably aren't going to hit in the case of the T1E6 with a .37 aim time, or with a .37 accuracy and a 4.1 second aim time, and probably won't even penetrate with a 33 average pen. So this thing is pretty much more useless than it used to be. I mean, the way it used to be before the update was fun. It was decent enough. You could get a good burst in. When I played the tank, yeah, it was pretty fun to play because you could actually do some pretty good damage with it. But then, okay, so the T1E6, at least you're still getting about, what, 30 damage? Yeah, about 30 damage, so you're getting about 60 damage in a burst of about a second to take each shells. And if they both hit and penetrate, you'll do, on average, 60 damage with an 8-second reload. Okay, fair enough. What about something like, oh, I don't know, the Light 6, or, I don't know, let's say the T7 combat car. Oh yeah, remember these things? They had about, like, 25 shells in the magazine. If you came up against a French tank, it was marvellous fun, pinging off their armour uselessly. Yeah, you remember that. It was also fun to do mass damage to a Panzerjäger or something, which made these things fun to play. Yeah, about that. Yeah, you only have 8 shells in the magazine now. Still with the 6, nearly 7-second reload time. Still with 27 average pen. Still with 6 average damage for AP. So what you've got here is if you do 8 times 6, what's that, 30? You're getting about 30 damage from this gun in about 7 seconds. To put that into perspective, for a tank like that, this thing does 50 average damage with a 10-second, with nearly a 10 rate of fire rounds per minute, which is about a 6-second reload. So what you're getting here, if all of these shells hit and penetrate, what you're getting here is you're getting 30 damage for about a 7-second reload time. Nothing else at this tier has got the same thing. For example, the 2-pounder in the Tetrarch. The same low damage of the same low armor, of the Light 6. The same-ish health, 350, 350. The same health, the same sort of armor, same sort of maneuverability, 12 rounds per minute, 30 average pen, 30 average damage, 64 average pen, with a better dispersion and, what's that, better aim time. 3.4 seconds. Yeah, so worse aim time, better accuracy, which has made this thing absolutely redundant. Same with the T7 combat car. Browning M2, 10 shells in the magazine, with, again, 5 average damage this time, 27 average pen, 6.5-second reload. So your average damage there, that's 5 times 10, so you got 50. 50 damage for a 6.5-second reload. Okay, that's slightly more appropriate. 27 pen. They're not all going to go through. They're not all going to do damage. At least with the T1E6, you've got over that 30 average pen threshold. So I mean, you know, yeah, great. You can at least sort of do some damage. You're doing 60 damage in a second with an 8.5-second reload. I mean, not great, but it's still 60 damage. You're doing 30 damage at best for a 7-second reload. This thing is absolutely useless. It's not even fun to play with 8 shells. That goes like that. With a machine gun, you sort of find an enemy, now reloading for 7 seconds. No, great. Well, let me just sit in here. Not only that, at least if you came up against something with a lot of armor, with 25 bullets in the magazine of this 15mm machine gun, at least you would be able to have time to sort of figure out a weak spot. I mean, for example, with the R35, or yeah, with like the R35 or something, the hatches could be penetrated at the right angle, so you at least had plenty of shells or plenty of bullets in order to actually try and hit that hatch and do damage. And you could do a little bit of damage if you were lucky with it. Now you've got 8 shells, 8 bullets to do no damage and have no time to find any sort of weak spot. This thing is now completely obsolete, apart from a collector's tank. You literally can't do a thing with this. It is completely out of it. Same with the T7 combat car, except slightly more effective. Because the T7 combat car has got slightly more. It's got, you know, slightly more, slightly more bullets in the M2 Browning. But still, the bullets still go like that, just instantly pop. There you go, they're out of existence. You've ineffectually shot at a cruiser. So you're doing absolutely nothing. And that means that it was fun to play at tier 2 and maybe at tier 3 if you were lucky with something like this, but now they're just absolutely useless. You can't do a thing with them. And that's the biggest problem that I found out, because I didn't know about this when the update went live. I was like, yeah, okay, so they've rebalanced it, some stuff will be nerfed. Yeah, sure, we've got all these tanks as collector's tanks, they've taken away most of the autocannons. Yeah, okay, great, they'll probably have left the autocannons alone. I go to play it because it has a ×5 on it. I go to play it, it has 8 shells in the magazine, I've got 3 Panzer IIIs in front of me, and I'm going, oh great, oh, there's no time for me to experiment with it, because I've got 8 shells, 8 bullets in the magazine. It's like, it's useless now. And, I mean, yeah, sure, as some people say, oh well, we're not new players. You know, we play these tanks because they're fun, or we want to seal club. Either one of them. And yeah, I mean, they were fun to play because they were so outlandish and outstanding in their field. Not because they were particularly great, for example, in the shape of the Light 6 or the T1E6, but just because they were great fun to play. Same with the FTAC, when it still had that 35mm on it. It wasn't a particularly good gun, that's why it was the stock gun. It wasn't a particularly good anti-tank gun, the dispersion was everywhere. But it was great fun to play, because it was a burst fire 25mm in a fixed turret tank destroyer. That's what made it fun to play. Now we've got the pop gun 47mm. So yeah, sure, it's better at play, it's better at killing tanks, but then yeah, if you want a gun that's you know, decent at its tier, does a decent amount of damage with good penetration for its tier, then take your pick of pretty much any tank destroyer at its at their tiers. For example, the Jackson. You know, the Jackson, the Firefly, you could say, is a tank destroyer. You know, the E25, the T28 HTC. You know, the, not the Vindicator, but maybe the Blaze, if you play it in particular like that. You know, the Jagdtiger, the list goes on. This has now just become a low-tier basic tank destroyer, which doesn't have particularly much interest, because it doesn't have that gun anymore. I mean, if they'd left us with the gun, and they'd kept some of its properties, it might have still been fun. But this is just a standard pop gun. I mean, you know, there's nothing particularly great about it. And, I mean, the biggest concern that I have, and the biggest problem that I have with this rebalance is that, yeah, sure, by all means help the new players, but don't make vehicles obsolete because of it. This thing is pretty much a collector's tank and a collector's tank only, as is this tank. As are pretty much most of these tanks here. Because they just decided to do away with anything that made the autoloader great. We should start a petition, make the autoloader great again. But, hey, we gotta help the new players. And so, yeah, there's that going on. Yeah, so that is just another rant I'm sure everyone will be happy about, but another rant about the rebalance of this, the low tiers, because it's still, I don't think it's particularly well implemented. And yeah, we're not new players, but then for the old players who used to like playing these tanks, because of the fun factor of them, there's no point. They'll just sit in the garage getting dust because they're not viable on a battlefield, because they're completely useless. I mean, this thing is completely outclassed by this thing, just out of virtue of the gun. I mean, it was anyway, but at least if you came up against a Tetrarch in a Light 6, you at least had the fear factor of the Tetrarch, because the Tetrarch will go, well, he can shred me. But now the Tetrarch will go out and he'll go, maybe I'll suffer 30 damage and I can just sort of shoot at him with about a 3-second reload and do, you know, quadruple his damage in the same time as he takes to reload his gun. So yeah, it's just boggles my mind. But hey, that's the rebalance for you. That is the, well, new, not really new now, but that is the, at the time, new patch. Fun. So yes, I'll thank you all for watching or slash listening, and goodbye.